$847 billion just vanished from American soil in 72 hours. Not through market collapse, not through natural disaster, through a $15 fee that someone thought Amazon wouldn't notice. While Congress was busy debating infrastructure spending, Amazon was busy dismantling the largest logistics network in American history. Every fulfillment center from Seattle to Miami received the same directive on Monday morning: pack everything. We're moving to Canada. This isn't corporate restructuring. This is economic evacuation. The numbers tell a story that should terrify every American watching this. 1.2 million jobs hanging by a thread, not jobs that might be affected someday, jobs that received termination notices yesterday. Amazon's entire American workforce got 72 hours notice that their paychecks were about to become Canadian currency. Think about what that means for your community. Every Amazon delivery truck you see rolling through your neighborhood, gone. Every warehouse worker clocking in at 4 a.m. to get your packages sorted, unemployed. Every small business that built their entire model around Amazon's platform, cut off. But here's where it gets truly devastating. Amazon didn't just leave America, they took the infrastructure with them. 23 fulfillment centers worth $6 billion in logistics equipment, loaded onto trucks, driven across the border, set up in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal by teams of workers who used to call Seattle home. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and if you've noticed your Amazon deliveries getting slower or disappearing entirely, because what happened to Amazon is just the beginning. The $15 border processing fee was supposed to generate $2 billion in revenue for customs enforcement. Instead, it generated the largest single capital flight in American economic history. When Amazon calculated the math, the fee didn't just eat into their profits. It made their entire American operation financially impossible. We're not talking about a company making less money. We're talking about a company that built modern American commerce, deciding America is no longer worth the cost of doing business. Let that sink in. The company that revolutionized how Americans shop, how small businesses reach customers, how logistics networks operate across an entire continent, just declared American economic policy too expensive to tolerate, and this is only day 3. 3 months ago, Amazon sent their first warning. Not a public statement or press release. A private letter delivered directly to congressional leadership outlining exactly what would happen if the $15 border processing fee became law. The letter was clear. Amazon's logistics model depends on seamless cross-border flow. 47% of their packages cross the Canadian border at least twice during processing. Raw materials from Asian suppliers arrive in Vancouver, get processed in American facilities, then ship back through Canada to reach northern markets efficiently. Add $15 to every package, both directions, and the math becomes impossible. Not difficult, impossible. According to sources familiar with the correspondence, Amazon's operations team calculated that the fee would create a 47% margin erosion across their entire North American network. We're not talking about reduced profits. We're talking about every dollar of revenue becoming 63 cents of loss. The second warning came in January. Amazon's CEO personally requested meetings with 3 separate congressional committees. All 3 declined. The reason given was scheduling conflicts. The reality was that Congress had already committed to the fee as a revenue generator and didn't want to hear why it wouldn't work. Meanwhile, Canadian officials were having very different conversations. According to trade documents obtained through Freedom of Information requests, Canada offered Amazon a complete fee waiver, a $2.3 billion tax incentive package, and expedited permits for new facility construction. The contrast couldn't be starker. America was demanding $15 per package and refusing meetings. Canada was offering billions in incentives and rolling out red carpets. Amazon's final warning arrived February 28th. Not a letter this time, a delegation. Senior Vice President of Logistics Operations, Chief Financial Officer, and Head of Government Relations flew to Washington personally. They requested 1 hour to explain the mathematical impossibility of continuing American operations under the proposed fee structure. Congress gave them 15 minutes in a hallway between other meetings. The message from that 15-minute conversation was unambiguous. According to sources present, Amazon's team laid out three scenarios. Congress could exempt logistics companies from the fee. Congress could cap the fee at $3 per package, or Amazon would relocate their entire North American operation to Canada within 90 days. Congressional leadership responded that Amazon was engaging in corporate bluffing and that a trillion-dollar company could easily absorb a $15 fee. That was March 15th. 90 days later, Amazon proved they weren't bluffing. The evacuation began on a Tuesday morning. Emergency board meetings were called for Wednesday. By Thursday evening, Amazon had signed lease agreements for 6 Canadian fulfillment centers and begun the process of terminating 23 American leases. The 72-hour timeline wasn't Amazon being dramatic. It was Amazon being efficient. They had spent 3 months trying to prevent this outcome. When prevention failed, they executed the contingency plan they had been preparing since January. And here's what makes this catastrophic. Amazon wasn't just moving their business, they were moving their knowledge. 15,000 engineers, logistics specialists, and operations managers received relocation packages to Canadian cities. The brain trust that built modern American e-commerce just became the foundation of Canadian economic supremacy. The person who designed this catastrophe has a name and a pattern. According to sources familiar with the policy development process, one individual consistently dismissed Amazon's warnings as corporate theater designed to extract concessions. This wasn't the first time. The same advisor who shaped the border fee policy had previously dismissed automotive industry concerns about parts tariffs. When Ford relocated their engine manufacturing to Mexico, the response was identical: corporate bluffing, empty threats, negotiating tactics. 3 separate Amazon executive meetings were declined by this individual's office. The stated reason was calendar conflicts. The actual reason, according to internal communications obtained through congressional oversight, was a conviction that Amazon's threats represented pure negotiating posture with no substance behind them. Here's where the pattern becomes clear. When pharmaceutical companies warned about supply chain disruptions from new FDA processing fees, the same dismissive response emerged. When tech companies raised concerns about data sovereignty requirements, identical language appeared in policy memos: corporate bluffing, theatrical leverage, empty posturing. The February meeting that sealed Amazon's fate reveals everything about this decision-making approach. Amazon's final proposal offered 3 compromise solutions: exempt logistics companies entirely, cap fees at $3 per package, or create a high-volume discount for companies processing over 1 million packages monthly. According to sources present at the meeting, each proposal was rejected before Amazon's team finished presenting the mathematical justification. The response was consistent with previous interactions: $15 per package, no exceptions, no modifications, no negotiations. An internal memo circulated the following day captures the mindset perfectly. Amazon's concerns were characterized as theatrical leverage designed to extract special treatment unavailable to smaller companies. The memo suggested that acquiescing to Amazon's demands would set a precedent encouraging other large corporations to manufacture crisis scenarios. Think about that logic. A 47% margin erosion threatening 1.2 million jobs was characterized as a manufactured crisis. Amazon's 3-month warning timeline was dismissed as elaborate corporate theater. But here's where it gets truly revealing. The same advisor who dismissed Amazon's concerns as bluffing had never worked in logistics, never managed supply chain operations, and had no experience with cross-border commerce regulation. The expertise gap wasn't just significant, it was complete. When Amazon's logistics team explained how cross-border package flow worked, according to sources familiar with the briefings, the response was that Amazon could simply adjust their business model to avoid border crossings. The suggestion demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of how continental logistics networks function. The pattern extends beyond Amazon. According to congressional staffers speaking on background, the same dismissive approach characterized responses to General Motors regarding parts supply chains, Apple regarding component logistics, and Microsoft regarding cloud infrastructure requirements. Each warning was treated as corporate manipulation rather than operational reality. Each company's expertise was dismissed in favor of ideological commitment to fee revenue generation. Each outcome was predictable and devastating. Amazon's exodus wasn't caused by policy failure. It was caused by systematic refusal to acknowledge that policy has consequences. The person who shaped this approach had spent months dismissing warnings from America's largest logistics company, while Canada was busy implementing every solution Amazon proposed. By March, while American policymakers were characterizing Amazon's timeline as theatrical pressure tactics, Canadian officials were finalizing lease agreements for facilities that would employ every engineer Amazon was preparing to relocate. The choice was clear: work with a government that understood the mathematical reality of logistics economics, or continue trying to educate officials who had decided that expertise was manipulation and consequences were bluffing. 847,000 direct Amazon jobs. That's just the beginning. When you factor in the supply chain cascade, we're looking at 2.3 million American workers whose livelihoods just became collateral damage in a policy experiment that ignored every warning sign. The numbers tell a story of systematic economic dismantling. UPS immediately announced emergency partnerships with Canadian logistics firms to maintain package flow. FedEx began negotiating facility leases in Toronto and Montreal. DHL started recruiting American drivers for cross-border operations based in Vancouver. Think about what that means. America's three largest shipping companies just acknowledged that they can no longer depend on American infrastructure to serve American customers. State by state, the devastation maps out like an economic earthquake. Texas loses $89 billion in logistics revenue. California faces a $156 billion crater in its economy. Michigan sees automotive supply chains that took decades to build rerouted through Canadian hubs overnight. But zoom in and the human cost becomes personal. Maria Santos worked at Amazon's Seattle Fulfillment Center for 8 years. Shift supervisor, mother of three, mortgage holder in a city where Amazon's presence kept home values stable. She learned about her layoff through a text message at 6:47 a.m. on Tuesday. By Friday, her house was underwater and her career was obsolete. Seattle isn't just losing Amazon. Seattle is losing its economic identity. The city faces a $2.7 billion tax revenue collapse. Public services that expanded to serve Amazon's workforce now serve empty office buildings. Schools that planned budgets around Amazon employee property taxes are announcing teacher layoffs. Municipal leaders across America are discovering what happens when your largest employer becomes someone else's gain. Bellevue, Washington projects a 43% budget shortfall. Arlington, Virginia sees its second headquarters investment becoming a Canadian competitive advantage. Austin, Texas watches distribution facilities that were supposed to anchor economic growth become empty concrete monuments to policy failure. The small business devastation extends beyond numbers into personal catastrophe. 400,000 third-party sellers built their entire business model around Amazon's American marketplace. These aren't large corporations with diversified revenue streams. These are family businesses, single-person operations, immigrant entrepreneurs who saw Amazon as their path to American prosperity. Jennifer Kim started selling handmade jewelry through Amazon 6 years ago, built it into a $2 million annual business employing 12 people. Her products were manufactured in Oregon, warehoused in Nevada, sold to customers across North America. When Amazon announced the relocation, Jennifer had 48 hours to decide between moving her entire operation to Canada or watching 6 years of work evaporate. She chose Canada, along with 73,000 other American small business owners who couldn't afford to lose their primary revenue source to policy ideology. Infrastructure tells its own story of abandonment. 23 Amazon fulfillment centers worth $6 billion in logistics equipment, 67 delivery stations that employed local drivers, mechanics, and operations staff, automated sorting facilities that represented the cutting edge of American technological capability. All of it dismantled, loaded onto trucks, and driven north. The facilities don't just close, they get stripped of everything that made them valuable. Conveyor systems, sorting robots, tracking technology, even the specialized lighting designed for 24-hour operations. Canada doesn't just get Amazon's business, Canada gets America's logistics infrastructure, but here's where the cascade becomes unstoppable. Walmart announced emergency meetings to evaluate cross-border logistics strategies. Target began negotiating Canadian distribution partnerships. Best Buy started exploring Toronto warehouse facilities. Amazon's exodus isn't happening in isolation. It's providing the blueprint for every retailer evaluating American versus Canadian operational costs. The technology brain drain accelerates the collapse. 15,000 engineers, data scientists, and logistics specialists who develop the algorithms that make modern commerce possible. They're not just changing jobs, they're transferring intellectual property that took decades to develop to a Canadian competitive advantage. Toronto's tech sector gained $43 billion in human capital overnight. Vancouver's logistics expertise expanded by levels that would normally take 15 years to achieve. Montreal became North America's new e-commerce innovation hub because American policymakers decided expertise was manipulation. International shipping routes that flowed through American ports for generations are being rerouted through Halifax and Vancouver. Canadian customs facilities designed to handle moderate traffic volumes are expanding to accommodate the entire North American logistics network. Chinese manufacturers who ship to American distribution centers are redirecting container ships to Canadian ports. This isn't business adjustment, this is economic surrender. America built the infrastructure that made global commerce possible, then handed competitive advantage to Canada over $15 per package, and the precedent is set. Every major corporation is now evaluating whether American policy stability justifies continued American operations. The message is clear: build your future somewhere that understands the mathematics of business reality. According to Harvard economics professor Dr. Rachel Martinez, this represents the largest single policy-driven capital flight in American history, not gradual business migration over decades. Complete operational exodus triggered by a specific government decision in a matter of weeks. Former Commerce Secretary David Thompson stated that Amazon's exodus isn't business strategy, it's economic necessity. When government policy makes profitable operations mathematically impossible, companies don't adjust, they relocate. Supply chain expert Dr. James Chen from MIT confirms what industry insiders have been saying privately. When you lose Amazon, you've lost the infrastructure that makes modern commerce possible. This isn't about one company leaving. This is about dismantling the foundation of American retail economics. But here's what makes expert consensus truly devastating. Canadian Trade Minister Sarah Williams publicly stated that Canada is seeing unprecedented interest from American corporations seeking operational alternatives, not exploratory conversations. Binding commitments with signed lease agreements and employee relocation packages. 23 days. That's how long Amazon's final American operations continue before complete cessation, not gradual downsizing or phased reduction. Total shutdown of the logistics network that handles 43% of American e-commerce transactions. State governors are scrambling with emergency intervention attempts. Texas Governor Michael Rodriguez flew to Seattle personally to negotiate with Amazon leadership. His offer included complete state tax exemption for 5 years and expedited permitting for any facility expansion Amazon wanted to pursue. Amazon's response was polite but definitive. The problem isn't state policy, the problem is federal border processing fees that make cross-border logistics economically impossible regardless of state incentives. California Governor Jennifer Martinez announced emergency legislation to provide direct subsidies offsetting federal border fees for logistics companies. The legislation faces immediate constitutional challenges and wouldn't take effect until after Amazon's operations cease. According to sources familiar with White House discussions, internal memoranda now acknowledge crisis-level economic disruption, not potential future problems, current reality requiring immediate damage control measures that may already be too late to implement effectively. Congressional leadership scheduled emergency hearings for December 20th, the same date Amazon's final American facilities shut down permanently. Congress will be holding hearings about preventing something that's already finished happening. The timeline pressure isn't theoretical. Shipping companies have 48 hours to finalize alternative logistics partnerships before Amazon's American distribution network disappears entirely. Retailers dependent on Amazon's fulfillment services have 6 days to arrange alternative arrangements or face complete supply chain breakdown. International business consultants report inquiry volume from American companies seeking Canadian operational assessment has increased by 430% in the past 2 weeks. These aren't casual explorations. These are emergency contingency evaluations driven by recognition that American policy unpredictability creates existential business risk. Economic analysts project complete transformation of North American supply chain infrastructure within 18 months, not gradual evolution, radical restructuring as companies follow Amazon's precedent and relocate operations to policy environments that understand business mathematics. The expert consensus is unanimous and terrifying. America just demonstrated that ideological commitment to revenue generation matters more than economic reality. Every major corporation is now evaluating whether continued American operations represent acceptable risk or inevitable liability. Think about what that means going forward. The country that built modern logistics infrastructure just handed competitive advantage to Canada because policymakers couldn't distinguish between corporate expertise and corporate manipulation. And it gets worse. According to trade specialists, Amazon's relocation establishes legal precedent for expedited corporate exodus under NAFTA provisions designed to facilitate business mobility. What took Amazon 90 days to accomplish can now be completed by other companies in 30 days using established legal frameworks. The countdown isn't just to Amazon's departure. The countdown is to systematic corporate evacuation as American business leadership recognizes that policy stability and business expertise are no longer valued in American governance. 18 months from now, North American supply chains will be completely transformed, not evolved or adjusted, rebuilt from the ground up with Canadian cities serving as the operational command centers for continental commerce. Toronto becomes the logistics capital that Seattle used to be. Vancouver emerges as the Pacific gateway that Los Angeles once controlled. Montreal transforms into the distribution hub that Chicago always thought it would remain. Canada didn't just win Amazon. Canada positioned itself as the stable alternative for every major corporation evaluating American operational risk. The precedent is established. When American policy makes business impossible, Canada makes business profitable. Microsoft announced preliminary discussions about relocating cloud infrastructure operations. Apple began exploring Canadian manufacturing partnerships. Google started negotiating Toronto office expansions that would dwarf their American presence. The $15 fee represents something larger than border processing revenue. It represents a systematic approach to corporate relations that prioritizes government authority over business expertise. Every major company now understands that American policy can change overnight without regard for operational reality or economic consequence. Think about what this means for your daily life. Online orders that used to arrive in 2 days now take a week because they're processed through Canadian facilities. Small businesses that built everything around Amazon's platform either relocated to Canada or simply disappeared. The job market in logistics, warehousing, and distribution collapsed in cities that built their economic identity around Amazon's presence. Seattle, Bellevue, Arlington, Austin, all discovering what happens when your largest employer becomes someone else's competitive advantage. Tell us in the comments how these changes have affected your community and whether you've noticed the shift in where your packages are coming from, because what happened to Amazon is happening to other companies right now. Canadian economic ministers are actively recruiting American corporations with infrastructure packages that make relocation financially irresistible. The same expertise that American policymakers dismissed as corporate manipulation is being celebrated and rewarded in Canadian economic development strategies. This isn't temporary business adjustment waiting for American policy correction. This is permanent competitive realignment. The infrastructure, expertise, and operational capacity that America spent decades developing now serves Canadian economic interests. America built the modern logistics system that made global commerce possible, then handed that entire system to Canada because someone decided $15 per package was worth destroying the foundation of American retail economics. The precedent extends beyond logistics into every sector where American regulatory approach conflicts with business operational requirements. Pharmaceutical companies are evaluating Canadian research facilities. Technology firms are exploring Canadian data centers. Manufacturing operations are investigating Canadian production partnerships. American economic leadership isn't declining gradually through natural competitive evolution. American economic leadership is being surrendered through policy decisions that ignore expertise, dismiss consequences, and prioritize ideological revenue generation over business reality. Canada emerges from this as the stable, predictable alternative for companies that need operational certainty.